May 9th, 2004. A tourist boat sets out from the small harbour town of Moss Landing into the cold waters of Monterey Bay. The unsuspecting passengers on board were about to witness something extraordinary. This film is a reconstruction of what happened next, based on eyewitness accounts and actual video footage from the day. It is a remarkable story of survival.
All your eyes are important now. From this minute
The boat's captain was Heidi Teora.
often get dolphins in here.
Teora ran a tourist business, taking groups of would-be nature watchers out onto the bay.
Keep those eyes scanning the water.
Her passengers had high hopes.
There were a number of people on the boat. Many of them were family groups, and there were some small children, and then there were older children like me celebrating Mother's Day with their mother.
It would be a Mother's Day they would never forget. Less than a mile from shore, and 5 short minutes from the harbour, they were already in deep water. Below the boat, a vast rock trench, in places deeper than the Grand Canyon, runs for about 60 miles. Much of what is down there remains unknown. At 9:57 a.m., Teora's first mate spotted something ahead. From over a mile away, it was impossible to tell quite what that something was.
We saw some splashing ahead of us, and oh, I was so excited. I said, hey, great, we've got something ahead of us.
All that was clear was that that something was splashing on the surface, and that something was big. As the boat drew closer, the feeling of excitement on board grew.
Everybody got charged up and started to move forward, and they were real excited.
Slowly, the activity began to take shape. Tall black fins rose from the waves like sails. They were over a metre high. Only one animal had dorsal fins that big. Orcas, otherwise known as killer whales.
I was ecstatic when we heard that there were orcas out there. I've been waiting years and going on these trips for years, waiting to see the orcas.
This was something special. Although orcas were known to frequent Monterey Bay, sightings were very unpredictable. Even Steve Johnston, a local veteran whale watcher, had never seen the bay's top predators.
When I heard that there were orcas out in front, I got really excited because I've never seen them before in the wild. This was my very first time, and that wasn't one of the things that I had on my list of expectations.
By 10:03, the whole boat could clearly see the killer whales.
Everybody went running to try to get a view, and I got up near the front of the boat. And we could see a lot of activity in dorsal fins and some jumping and thrashing around, so they were pretty active.
At first, the children on board were excited. It looked like the orcas were playing.
We saw lots of thrashing, lots of killer whales jumping.
They were acting kind of rambunctious and jumping out of the water and coming down again.
From over 100 meters away, the activity looked innocent enough. Even to Teora, who had been on this water more often than anyone else on board.
Quite often when they get together, they will just kind of gather and play, and I thought that's what we might be seeing up ahead of us.
But as she edged the boat closer, it became clear that this was not play. The time was 10:05.
But I slowed down, and this activity started to take on a more sinister tone. There was a blow that erupted from the gathering of killer whales that was far too big.
When any marine mammal comes to the surface to breathe, it exhales a spout of gas and water into the air, just like a human snorkeler. The size of the spout is related to the size of the animal. And this exhalation was far too large to have been caused by a killer whale.
That blow was way too big, so clearly it was not coming from killer whales.
A fully grown male orca can be up to 9 meters long and 6 tons in weight. But the exhalation Tiora had seen belonged to something much, much bigger. Something that dwarfed her boat. Whatever was underneath them, it was huge. Tiora tentatively inched her boat closer to try and get a better look at what was in the water. It was 10:07.
Then as we got closer, I could see what it was. It was a California gray whale cow.
The California gray whale is one of the largest animals on the planet. A fully grown female, known as a cow, can easily weigh up to 35 tons, the equivalent of 11 female African elephants. The barnacles encrusted on the upper surface of this creature's head positively identified it.
And then when we got a little closer, somebody yelled, I think it was Heidi that first realized that there were gray whales in the area, which is what had attracted the killer whales.
Grey whales and killer whales are not related. Orcas are in fact a type of dolphin. They are known as killer whales, not because they are whales, but because they are whale killers.
This was the attack that I never wanted to see.
One organization is specially equipped to reveal the dark mysteries of Monterey Bay. Marine biologist George Matsumoto had heard of killer whale attacks on grey whales, but even he had never seen one.
Even here at the Research Institute, where we'll spend 300 days a year on 2 different ships out there, we've never actually observed a killer whale attack from our vessels.
Up until now, reports of orca attacks were the stuff of legend, rarely glimpsed even by those who studied these animals. But the Mother's Day encounter would provide scientists with detailed video evidence of an attack from almost start to finish. 10:15. 18 minutes after they had first sighted the orcas, Tiora spotted another body in the water.
My goodness, you guys, look off the left side. Look over there.
In the midst of the mayhem, there was another, smaller participant.
And then we are told by Heidi that the orcas are attacking a gray whale and a baby.
Grey whales only raise one infant at a time. Judging by the size of this calf, it was around 3 months old. There was nothing anyone could do.
Look at that little baby.
The passengers could only watch in horror and fascination.
You don't really want to watch, but you have to because you want to know what's going on.
No, your mothers can understand.
Truly, this was one of the most powerful things any of us on board had ever seen.
The orcas are so tough. But see how they're going after its fluke tips and the little pectoral flippers?
The killer whales were thrashing their tails at it.
The killer whales were trying to prevent the calf from breathing. They were trying to drown it.
One swam up over its head and pushed down and was pushing it down. And you can't, these are mammals. They have to breathe.
A grey whale can hold its breath for up to 15 minutes.
Oh my God.
But not when it is being repeatedly forced underwater.
There was a moment when it tugged at my heartstrings that This mom was, fighting for the life of her baby.
Grey whales are ferociously protective parents, but they have little defense against a prolonged group attack. But how had these two mighty adversaries come together so close to the harbour? Environmental journalist Dick Russell knew that grey whales were only ever fleeting visitors to the area.
They've just come from one of 3 lagoons in Baja California where the baby whale was born probably 4 months earlier. And they're about to head 6,000 miles all the way to the Bering Strait between Alaska and Russia.
Grey whales have one of the longest migrations of any mammal on Earth. It's a massive 14,000-mile trip from Alaska to Mexico and back again. Throughout their great voyage, the grey whale sticks to shallow water, hugging the coastline. They use the kelp beds and surf noise to disguise their presence from predators. But in Monterey Bay, the kelp beds run out. They have little choice but to break cover and run a 23-mile gauntlet across open water. Straight over Monterey's unique submarine canyon.
Here in the middle of the bay is the Monterey Bay Aquarium Research Institute. And also right here is the start of the Monterey Submarine Canyon. And the Monterey Submarine Canyon is a phenomenal feature. It cuts the bay in half. It goes away from shore 100 kilometers, reaching a depth of almost 4,000 meters by the time it hits bottom.
Even if the whales stayed in the shallows, they would still have to cross the deep water of the canyon. But perhaps there's another reason why the whales take a shortcut across the mouth of the bay. This place was once home to a much more formidable predator. Could grey whales retain a sixth sense of Monterey Bay as a place of danger?
100 years ago or more, the main predator of gray whales was still human beings. Gray whales were almost driven to extinction in the 19th century. They were hunted mercilessly. In the lagoons in Baja California, right there in their birthing grounds, in places like Monterey, the baleen was used, the oil was used. It was really just a bloodletting.
After the Californian grey whale's breeding grounds were discovered in the 1850s, the animals were hunted to near extinction. By the 1920s, only a few hundred individuals remained. The industry became uneconomic, and whaling in Monterey Bay ceased. But could memories of those dark days live on in the minds of today's migrating grey whales?
So maybe there's some kind of memory, who knows, a genetic memory in the whales, some of the whales, that says we don't want to get too close to shore.
There may be a more pressing reason for the mother's risky decision to take a shortcut. Desperation born of hunger.
The mother probably hasn't eaten since she was last on the feeding grounds, which was way back last fall, last October. And now here it is May, and she's running maybe a little late, and her energy supplies are dwindling perhaps more than she wants them to be. And so she's decided that she's got to go across that canyon to save time.
The strategy has backfired. It's 10:41, 38 minutes since Teora's boat arrived at the scene, and the mother and calf are in obvious distress. This rapid blowing is the whale equivalent of panting. They are, quite literally, gasping for air. It doesn't help that at this stage of their journey, the mother is significantly weakened. One man who understands more than most about the rigors of their epic journey along the coast is marine biologist Wayne Perryman.
Their tanks are starting to run on empty. You can see the females are very, very thin. They're lactating and feeding their calf while they're fasting, so they're pouring out energy in an area where they can't eat. So they're very hungry as they go northbound.
Not only has the mother not eaten for months, but she has since given birth and nurtured her 2-ton baby, further draining her precious energy reserves. By 10:57, the attack on the weakened individuals was intensifying.
It just kept getting more frenzied and more frenzied.
Orcas hunt like wolves, in packs.
They were obviously in communication with each other in some way because they were just precision like a drill team. And they were all in a line, and when they'd come out of the water, they'd come out as one.
This coordinated hunting strategy was well known to marine biologists like Nancy Black. On that Mother's Day, Black too was out on the water in a different part of Monterey Bay. Flashback to 9:53. Just 4 minutes before Tiora first spotted fins in the water, Black was trailing a pod of killer whales.
When they're first searching for gray whales, sometimes the killer whales can be spread out over maybe 10 or more miles in the area. And then when one of the groups of killer whales locates a gray whale, then all of a sudden sometimes you'll see other killer whales just porpoising in from a distance.
Suddenly 2 killer whales appeared right in front of her. Then a third, then a fourth, then more. These animals were preparing for something. Black backed off. Everywhere Black looked, orcas were appearing. They were responding to some sort of signal. She could only presume that they had been alerted to a kill by other orcas somewhere in the bay.
So obviously they've heard this and listened for it, and there's not competition. It seems to be the killer whales are working together, and probably having extra help is an advantage.
Without warning, the orcas suddenly picked up speed and headed east. Black knew something special was up, and before speeding off to pick up assistance, she radioed her sightings to a colleague, Richard Tornillo.
Richard, they're up here at about 2 o'clock.
Tornillo's boat was 15 miles away with another group of tourists when the call came in. But having run natural history trips for 25 years, Tornillo knew that this was an extremely rare chance to see a killer whale attack at first hand.
Our other boat was whale watching along with our research boat, and they had come across an attack. So they called us and we went over and looked. I mean, it's, for a lot of people, it's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to see one of the greatest predation events on Earth.
One passenger on board that day was local professional bird guide, Roger Wolf.
We've been having a pretty good day. Everybody was real excited. And then the call comes in over the radio.
Hello? What's up?
Richard, they're up here at about 2 o'clock.
At 9:58, Tornillo changed course and headed for new coordinates. Even traveling at 13 knots, it would take him over 3/4 of an hour to get there. But the eyewitness reports from this boat were to prove invaluable.
We were quite a ways from the scene at that time. We had to go under power for a good, half hour, 40 minutes in order to get to that location.
It was now exactly 56 minutes since Tiora's boat had first arrived on the scene.
And as we approached the scene, we could see lots of splashing off in the distance, a lot of thrashing and splashing from quite a ways off.
The attack had now been going on for over an hour. Wolf began to decode what was happening in the sea ahead.
And the closer we got, then we began to see the dorsal fins of the killer whales, particularly the really 6-foot tall dorsal of a male killer whale.
Less than 100 meters away now, Tornillo carefully maneuvered his larger boat closer to the carnage than Tiora had been prepared to risk. This footage from the day of the attack shows just how close eyewitness Roger Wolf was to the battle scene. And from this angle, Wolf was able to see something different. Supercharged headbutting.
For the most part, it seemed to consist of very intense body blows and headbutts. We would see the killer whales come in and hit the calf, and at the same time, we'd see their dorsal fin shake with the impact. And the blow out of their blowhole would be more intense upon impact.
This ramming was not just winding the calf, it was causing major internal damage. Dr. Frances Gulland is the Director of Veterinary Science at the Californian Marine Mammal Center. She knows from previous victim examinations just what sort of damage can be done.
Well, when the orcas attack the grey whale calf, they actually ram the animal sort of again and again, repeatedly bumping into its side. And that type of aggressive ramming, blunt trauma, essentially breaks blood vessels, and the calves bleed into the subcutaneous tissues. So they bleed into the muscle and the blubber underneath the skin.
It was no wonder then that this mother was using every ounce of her strength and all of her wits in a supreme effort to protect her baby.
The mother was doing everything she can to absorb the blows and keep the calf away from the killer whales.
But how could one mother single-handedly keep the killer whales from taking her baby down? It's now 10:08, and Nancy Black has arrived with video equipment. The combination of video footage and close-up photographs was to prove crucial in the later analysis. By photographing the dorsal fins, Black hoped she would be able to identify the individual attackers. It was only later, when she was able to cross-reference these images with the fins already catalogued in her comprehensive database, that she was able to confirm the precise identity of the attackers.
We photograph the killer whales to identify the individuals. I always take a photograph just to document it.
As it turned out, she knew them well.
The ones that we saw that day, I can tell mostly because I know all the individuals now. So I know, I knew who those were.
Cross-referencing those individuals with her notes, Black confirmed that the attackers had been there in numbers.
That day there was quite a large group. There's about 12 killer whales, which is at least 2 family groups together.
She had seen these groups many times in the bay, but never before working in conjunction. By 11 o'clock, all 3 boats were now on site, each watching the heavyweight combat from different vantage points. By now, the tide had turned against the grey whale mother and calf.
At this point, the mother and calf gray whale are kind of just stopped there. They really can't get away now too quickly. The killer whales are blocking them from the front and from the sides. The mother could easily escape if she wanted to and just take off, but she doesn't do that. She stays very protective of her calf.
The mother attempts to get her calf out of harm's way by pushing it up out of the water and onto her belly.
You look over and you see the calf, and it looks like the calf is sitting on top of the water.
The Californian grey whale mother was attempting to balance 2 tons of infant on her underside.
The calf's rolled onto her chest, and she's rolled onto her back, and she's holding it up out of the water so the killer whales can't get to it.
but she can't sustain this position for long. Turned upside down, she must hold her breath even while soaking up the power of the orca's heavy blows. This battling maternal drive is well known to environmental journalist Dick Russell.
Just imagine what this mother whale has to do in order to protect this young one. She's got to fight off this pack in whatever way she can with all the strength that she has. I mean, she weighs, 30 tons. So she's much bigger than an individual orca. But orcas are ferocious, and keep in mind that the gray whale has no teeth. She's a baleen whale. And there's a pack of wolves upon her and trying to get at the baby.
Killer whales are armed with a set of 50 ferocious teeth, specially adapted for ripping and tearing. A calf is too big for the orcas to bite into her blubber. But from studying the carcasses of other grey whale victims, scientists knew that ultimately they were after something else.
The parts that are eaten first are the soft parts, the parts that are easy to pull off. The tongue is a very vulnerable piece. It's a nice, soft, fatty thing that they can rip off.
The orca's main prize is the protein-rich baby grey whale tongue. It's enough to make a meal for a family of 5. Dr. Francis Gulland has conducted necropsies on the dead bodies of many grey whale calves and had a good idea of the likely outcome.
What we expect to see in a grey whale calf after it's been attacked by an orca is a lot of bruising under the skin and into the blubber as a result of the orca actually ramming into the side of the calf.
But it's not the force of the ramming alone that damages the victim. It's the trauma.
As the orcas attack, that in itself could kill a grey whale calf due to the stress. And they're very sensitive to stress, and they'll produce a lot of adrenaline and corticosteroids. And those hormones can cause contraction of heart muscle, so that the animal actually has a heart attack and dies from heart failure. So the stress could kill the animal before the hemorrhages do.
On Mother's Day in Monterey Bay, it is now 11:19. The orcas are steadily wearing down the terrified calf. In desperation, the mother employs her only weapon, her massive tail.
She's actively thrashing about with her tail. In fact, we do see her land a few blows with her big tail flukes on the killer whale several times.
The tail flukes of a fully grown female grey whale are over 3 meters wide and can weigh 180 kilos.
In fact, we even see the calf make aggressive maneuvers, trying to slap it with the side of its head and using its flukes to try and slap the killer whales too.
But this flailing counterattack has little chance of success in the face of so many attackers. On Tiara's boat, Debbie DeBose noticed something new about the orca's behavior. Organization.
It was impossible for the mom and baby to make a getaway and run away. They were sort of corralled there and surrounded.
This is a coordinated attack strategy. Simultaneous attacks on a cow and calf from both sides at the same time.
You've got 3 of them on one side.
There was nowhere to turn, and the staggered formation strikes were taking their toll.
The mom was obviously getting tired, as was the baby.
From her inflatable, Nancy Black was trying to keep count of the fast-moving orcas.
Okay, now some of the killer whales are missing. They must be somewhere around here.
While 6 orcas maintained their assault, another 6 had disappeared from her view. From the perspective of the other 2 boats, their whereabouts soon became clear.
They separated into two groups and would actually circle around and come from two different sides to attack.
From where he was watching, Roger Wolf saw a developing pattern of behavior.
There were two teams. One team would be in there actively just pounding the heck out of the whales, and the other team, the other killer whales, would be off to the side, and we could see them. They were over there reoxygenating, you know, breathing, trying to recover until it was their turn to come back in.
The orcas had formed a tag team, ensuring there would be no let-up in the onslaught. What the witnesses were seeing firsthand was the clearest evidence yet of strategic intelligence. Going over the footage later, Nancy Black was able to confirm just how sophisticated the orca's behavior was.
The killer whales are really coordinated. They're like a team working together. There's a lot of communication going on. And there's a killer whale right next to it. You can see its pectoral fin of the killer whale is actually trying to push the calf away from its mother, because that's one of their tactics. They need to get the calf separated from its mother in order to really kill the calf.
Despite the apparent chaos in the water, the orcas are using precision methods to separate the 13-meter-long adult grey from her calf. But it's not easy.
The mother kind of plasters the calf right next to her side there and does not leave it.
In spite of her size, the mother grey whale is agile, constantly rolling her 35-ton bulk to prevent the orcas from isolating her calf.
It's harder if the mother is right there because she's huge.
But at 11:35, and despite the danger from the mother's tail flukes, one orca makes an audacious move.
There's a killer whale just trying to get in between the mother and calf there, trying to use her flukes to push her way between that mother and calf. It's pretty sad to watch, but of course it is part of nature.
By now, the struggle was moving into its third hour.
It seems to me there's no way this calf has got a chance. I mean, it looks like the killer whales are going to get this calf. There's no escape for it.
For many of those on board Tiara's boat, what had started as a pleasurable day out on Monterey Bay had turned into a nightmare.
What we saw was so painful. It was so brutal. Several people were trying to photograph this, but they just didn't have the stomach for it, and they just put their cameras away.
Oh, God.
The outcome looks bleak, and for many of Tiara's passengers, it's become too much to bear.
Yeah, I think it's got some internal injuries.
Oh, God.
The orcas are biting the fins and tail flukes of the calf and dragging it away from its mother's side. The sea is running red with blood.
Oh.
By 11:40, the combined and coordinated efforts of the orcas have succeeded in driving mother and baby apart.
It was really sad because you just see them separated and you think, how would I feel? I would be really scared because if someone was like trying to take me away from my mom, it would be really scary.
Word of the orca attack spread from Moss Landing to the whale-watching community of Monterey. In the aftermath, interest in the incident grew, attracting both local and national attention. Reporters rang in to speak to those who had witnessed the attack. But the real story was only just beginning. As the shock waves from the events of Mother's Day were still reverberating, there came a startling report. On May 13th, in the early hours, Another battered grey whale calf had washed ashore on the beach at Moss Landing. It had all the hallmarks of the Mother's Day incident. Amid all the speculation, one scientist, George Matsumoto, sought to prove a link between the two attacks and discover why this bewildering behaviour was apparently only happening here in the bay.
But one of the things that is being postulated is that we've got killer whales, a pod of killer whales, lying in wait right over here, waiting for the gray whales as they cross back and forth on the migratory pathway, mostly as the whales are coming up north.
The killing continued. Over the following weeks, reports of copycat attacks on grey whales became an almost daily occurrence. As news of the killer whale attacks spread from Moss Landing across America, even greater numbers of people began arriving, in the hope of seeing this brutal behaviour for themselves.
Whales are up here on the left.
They were rarely disappointed. As business boomed in Monterey, the scientists turned yet again to the video evidence of the Mother's Day attack in the pursuit of answers.
After the Mother's Day event, we had more attacks and, several per week. We were kind of overwhelmed with it because you're out doing research, you're getting up early and staying out late. There was at least 16 predation events that we knew about. There could have been others that we could have missed as well, which is really high. Finally, we realized that, this is something really unprecedented that had never happened before. It was an exceptional year.
But neither by re-examining the Mother's Day footage, nor by witnessing similar attacks, could Black explain the explosion of violence that spring. She called fellow marine biologist Wayne Perryman, who had been conducting an annual census on the migrating grey whales at nearby Piedras Blancas.
Right away, Nancy was saying that they're seeing a fair number of killer whale attacks, so we were keeping our eyes open to see if we'd see killer whales down in our area.
Perryman didn't see killer whales, but while counting the migrating grey cow-calf pairs as they passed close to shore, he did notice something surprising.
As the counts began, we were getting, good numbers. We're seeing 10, 15 cow-calf pairs a day early in the migration. It increased up to about 25 a day as we got closer to the peak. Then all of a sudden it jumped up to where we were seeing 40 and 45 cow-calf pairs passing in a day, which is really unusual.
The change in 2004 was the number of gray whale calves. So the killer whales, obviously took advantage of that huge number of calves coming through and were here more frequently. So they really, used that situation in Monterey Bay to hunt the gray whales.
Well, I think that the word got out. The killer whales got on the gray whales. They found that there were large numbers of calves there, and they just began to aggregate in that environment because it was a rich feeding opportunity for them.
More grey whales meant more grey whale attacks. The orcas were drawn in by the unexpected abundance of food, but the grey whales were travelling 7,000 miles. Why had this behaviour only been seen in the middle of Monterey Bay? The answer to that riddle lies in an understanding of the way orcas hunt.
Killer whales have echolocation, so they often will spread out, maybe over a half a mile or so, kind of searching.
Grey whales have developed highly successful strategies to avoid detection.
Because once the mothers and calves start crossing the bay, they go into this really kind of quiet swimming. Only sometimes you just see their blowholes. They hardly surface.
But when the greys are over the canyon, they are far more exposed. The huge chasm below them creates a sonic environment perfectly suited to the hunting pods of listening killer whales. Like U-boats using sonar to hunt down ships, the orcas prowl the waters over the canyon's edge, keenly listening out for the smallest amplified clues. Here a tail slap where the briefest verbal communication is much louder.
Killer whales find them by listening, passive listening for the gray whales, because they kind of make a knocking sound sometimes to navigate. So they have a much higher advantage of ambushing them here in Monterey Bay than they do other places along their migration.
The attacks only happened in Monterey Bay because it was only here that the whales stopped hugging the coast and took a shortcut across open water. It was only here that the water was deep enough for the orcas to launch their attack. And it was only here, in Monterey Bay, where a unique submarine canyon acted as an echo chamber to aid their hunting. There was one further riddle surrounding the Mother's Day incident that remained unanswered. The attack had started around 9:50 and carried on until 1. More than 3 hours. Why had it lasted so long? Nancy Black went back to the tapes. By matching the video images with underwater hydrophone sound recordings made at the scene, she looked again at the individual attackers.
If you put it on a computer, you know, the frequencies, the call types, the patterns are very different between the two.
Visually, the adult males were identifiable by their towering dorsal fins. At nearly 2 meters high, they're as tall as a man.
You can see the male killer whale in the background there. He's not really involved as much.
The dorsal fins she could see at the heart of the battle were smaller.
It's the adult females that are doing most of the work, even though there's others in the area.
By listening to the orca's communications, Black heard something else, the higher-pitched sound of juveniles.
And they're always making kind of playful sounds and, you know, lots of whistling.
The footage confirmed what she had heard. At the very center of the attack were juvenile orcas.
See the little juveniles in there? They're really close to the action, so they're probably observing and learning how to do this for the future.
Astonishingly, this was not a full-on attack. It was a training session. The orcas were showing their offspring how to make a kill.
It's a way for them to learn how to do this over their lifetimes, and eventually when they become adults, you know, they'll be able to participate, so it's like transmitted culturally throughout their group.
The orcas were taking their time, as if to make sure that the juveniles had learnt their lesson. But it was this deliberation that was to provide the mother and calf with their chance of escape. 11:41, the morning of the Mother's Day attack. The orcas are continuing their assault, but against the odds, the mother grey whale is reunited with her calf.
It was amazing that the mother had that kind of stamina, not to just give up.
The mother makes one last desperate attempt to escape. Just as the killer whales take advantage of deep water over the canyon, so the grey whales find sanctuary in the shallows. It was then that Tiora noticed something extraordinary.
Have you noticed we keep flowing in, we're moving in?
The mother grey whale, though under siege, was on the move, slowly and painstakingly nudging her calf towards shore and shallower waters.
It finally sunk into me. These animals are moving to the coast. They're headed in on the straightest route they can take to shallow water. When she takes her calf underwater, they're moving in, they're going east. Orcas don't like shallow water, and there's a chance that what they're doing is that mother's thinking if she can just feed into shallow water, maybe they can evade the orcas.
Meanwhile, on Tornello's boat, Roger Wolfe had also identified the mother's new strategy.
Now, every time there was a break in the action between the two teams, the mother and the calf would start heading for shore.
but they were still over a mile from the coast, and the orcas had redoubled their efforts.
The baby was virtually being eaten alive.
Progress was painstakingly slow, and by now it was hard to see how the calf could possibly survive.
It appeared that maybe the baby was doomed. Heidi, our captain, decided that maybe we should leave the area about that time.
I was reluctant to go, but I wasn't sure I wanted to stay around and see the ending to this.
The other boats had come in, the Monterey boats had come in, and they were circling around and watching. I figured that we'd seen enough, I'd seen more than enough, so we took off.
I think everyone on the boat felt that they had witnessed something that they might never ever witness again, and maybe not want to witness again.
As Tiora headed for home, the passengers on board were left to reflect silently on all they had seen. Little did they know that the calf and mother that they had left behind were about to make a dramatic bid for freedom. 13:02, and by now the two grey whales were within a mile of shore. The mother has manoeuvred her baby away from the danger zone, but the calf has sustained a terrible battering.
And so the question comes out, do they ever get away?
The mother knows she has just one chance to save her baby.
If the calf and the mother can get into 60 feet of water or less, the killer whales will break off the attack.
Less than 60 feet, and the orcas won't be able to build up sufficient momentum for ramming.
Of course, the next question is, how deep is it here? Quick look at the depth finder, 60 feet.
3 long minutes pass. And then suddenly, the killer whales break the surface and head back out into the bay. They have aborted their attack.
You know, this attack probably took 4 or 5 hours of all that energy expended, and the killer whales ended up with nothing.
After 3 hours of brutal assault, the cow and her calf are battered but still breathing. As long as they have managed to escape major internal damage, their chances of survival are good. Their story is one of a remarkable escape from almost certain death.
So this calf did survive, actually, on Mother's Day and headed back up to Alaska.
For the eyewitnesses, it had been a day they would never forget.
I was in a state of awe. This was something I never dreamed I'd be able to be an eyewitness to.
When we found out the next day that the mother whale and the baby had gotten away, we were just elated. It was wonderful, wonderful news, and that mother whale was a real fighter.
I had to really count my blessings that I had actually seen what I'd seen. It was a wonderful day.